In this lesson, we're going to talk about configuration files. Configuration files hold information for the package. They can be used by several packages, and it allows you to update multiple packages from one location. Here in Visual Studio, I'm going to right-click in the control flow, go to Package Configurations, place a check in Enable Package Configurations, and click Add, Next, and in the drop-down menu, I'm going to select XML configuration file, which is here at the top. Then in the configuration file name, I'll place a name in here. I'm going to click on Browse. I'm just going to select my desktop, and I'll just call this my first config. And click Save. Next. I'm going to maximize this screen, and over on the left you'll see all of the executables and objects that are in my package and the properties of those objects. Now I don't have any variables or connections created in this package, so I have nothing to really select here except for the properties of the package itself. So I'm going to hit cancel here and close, and I'm going to create a variable on the package itself. I'm just going to call this string file name. Make the data type a string, and I can make it C:/test.txt. And so the file name is C:/test.txt. Close this up. I can right click again, go to Package Configurations, Add, Next. I'm going to click Browse, go to my desktop again, and I'll call this my first config. Click Save, Next, and now in the property screen, which I'll maximize, you'll see that variable I created and the properties of that variable. So now I can select any of these properties here. Of course, most likely I'm going to select the value. I'll place the check in center value, and you'll see the value of C:/test.txt would be placed in the configuration file. I'll go to Next. I'm going to call this config variable. This is the configuration name, which just shows in the configuration organizer here, which you can see here. I'm going to click Close, and now I'll go to my desktop, and you'll see that file here. If I open that file, I'm opening the file using XML Notepad, which is a free tool from Microsoft, but you can use Internet Explorer if you prefer. And here in the configuration file, we can see the configured value, and it's test.txt. The configured value is the value you want to look for in the configuration files. I'm going to go ahead and delete this file, go back to my package, I'll right click, go to Configurations, and I'm going to click Remove to remove that configuration. Now I'm going to right click in the Connection Manager and create a couple connections. I'll connect to the OLEDB connection to the local host at AdventureWorks 2008, and I'll connect to, let's pick the AdventureWorks DW 2008 also. So I've got two connections in my Connection Manager now that I can connect to. I'm going to right click, go to Package Configurations, click Add, Next. Again, I'll do the same thing. I'll go to my desktop, but this time I'm going to call it my connection. Connections is good. Go to Next. I'll maximize the property screen again. Now we can see not only the variable I created, we can also see the two connections I created. The most common thing to do with configuration files is to put connection information inside of the configuration files. And of course I'm going to put in either the connection string, or we can break it up into individual items like initial catalog, password, username, server name, and the protection level. All of those things could be entered in there, but I'm just going to select the connection string to combine most of those together. And I'll do that for both connections. And we'll click Next. I'll call this my connections again. And hit Finish. Close. Now I'll go to my desktop. There's my connections.dtsconfig file. Again, I'll open it with XML Notepad 2007. Go to XLS output. And now I see the connection string for one connection and the other one. I have the AdventureWorks DW 2008 and the AdventureWorks 2000 database connection strings in my configuration file. So now I can make changes to this configuration file and the packages will be updated. Now, a more common way to use configuration files is to use multiple configuration files, and that's one for each connection. So I'm going to click Edit and edit this configuration file here. I'm going to uncheck the AdventureWorks DW connection. Go to Next, and I'm going to call this AW for AdventureWorks. Finish, and I'm going to click Add, Next. Again, I'll go to my desktop. I'll call this AW DW for AdventureWorks Data Warehouse. Next. And inside of the properties, I'll just select the AdventureWorks DW properties and the connection string there. Go to Next. I'll call this AWDW and hit Finish. Close. And now I'll have two connections on my desktop here. The connections one I initially created, which now only has the connection to AdventureWorks 2008, and then the AWDW one I created, and then has the AdventureWorks 2008 DW connection in it. And the reason you would break these up into two different connections instead of just one is so that multiple packages can use these connections. For example, in this package I have two connections. So I can use both of those configuration files in this package. But let's say I didn't have the AdventureWorks DW 2008 connection. I only had the AdventureWorks 2008 connection. If that was true, then I would just use one of those configuration files, not two of them. But I would still be able to use the configuration file. If I combine both configurations into one configuration file, then both connections must exist on the package. So it's a better idea, or a best practice, to create multiple configuration files, one for each connection. Now I'm going to drag out an execute SQL task here. I'm going to right click, go to Edit. I'm going to select just the AdventureWorks 2008 connection here. And in my SQL statement, I'm going to go ahead and click Build Query. And I'm just going to select a table here. I'll just right click and hit Add Table. Any table's fine, it doesn't matter. I'll just select all columns, that's fine. Click OK. Click OK. I'll run this query one time, it should run fine. There we go. Now that was connecting to the AdventureWorks 2008 connection. So I'm going to go back to my desktop, and in the configuration file, I'm going to change the configuration information. It's connecting to AdventureWorks 2008. I'm going to change that. I'm going to change it to a different information. Let's say there's my configured value. And instead of saying AdventureWorks 2008, I'm going to say AdventureWorks 2007. Now that database doesn't exist, of course. I'll save this, close it, and let's go back to my package. Now I'll run the package. And notice my execute SQL task turns red. I'll go to Progress, and it says the localhost AdventureWorks 2008 connection may not be configured correctly. And that's correct. It is not configured correctly because I changed the information in the configuration file to a connection that does not exist. In the Try It section, we're going to create a configuration file, and we're going to pass information to a package from the configuration file. Here in Visual Studio, I'm going to right click, go to Package, Variables here, and I'm going to create a variable called string config test. I'll set the value, or the data type actually, to string, and the value will be hard coded. And that's literally hard coded. We'll close this up. I'm going to drag a script task over into my package. And I'll right click and go to edit, or you can double click on it. In the read only variables, I'm going to scroll down and select string config test. Go to edit script. I'll maximize this. And here where it says add your code here, I'm going to add in message box tts.variables. Put in the literal name of the variable, config test, and the value of that. And this will cause a message box to appear showing the value of the variable. Click OK. I'll run this one time to show the value of the variable. And there it is. It says hard coded. We'll click OK and stop the debugging. And now we're going to create configurations on this. We'll go to right click, package configurations, enable package configurations, add, next. I'll select XML configuration file. And the location I'll select here will be, I'll browse, go to computer, C drive, projects, SSIS personal trainer, and I'll just call this config test. And hit next. I'll maximize the screen, scroll up, there's my variables, go to the properties of that variable, put a check next to value, and you'll see the hard-coded value. Go to next, and I'll call this configuration config variable, and click finish, close. And now I have a script task that's going to pop up the information in the variable. Now if I run it again, you'll see that it still says hard-coded because I haven't changed the information in the configuration file. I'll go to that folder now and we'll see the value of that configuration file. It's under C, Projects, SSIS Personal Trainer, and there it is. I'm going to open this up with the XML notepad. Here we can see the configured value. And again, it's hard-coded. I'll change that value. I'll change the configured value to config data. Save that, close it, go back to the package, and now when I debug the package, the value of the variable will show, and now it is config data. So the package is actually pulling the information from the configuration file. It's not using the value that we saved in the package itself. In this lesson, we showed you how to use configuration files. We showed you that it holds information for the package, it can be used by several packages, and it allows multiple packages to be updated from one location.